Opening day was a ton of fun. We'll break it all down up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Nola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu,
Ricardo and Votto, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hip some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on March 31st. Opening day is in the books. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we will have opening day overreactions. Ton of injuries already, unfortunately, that we'll have to break down. We've got some week 2 sleepers later on if your lineup resets on Monday. So if you're looking for 2-star pitchers and all that fun stuff. Before we get started, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, we really appreciate a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Lots to talk about, but first, Scotty, happy birthday! It's Scott's birthday.
It is. It's true.
Happy birthday from all of us to you. We wish it was our birthday so we could party too. Hey,
What, did you work at Red Lobster or something?
I've been to Chevy's a lot in my time, you know.
Yeah, it's always weird that it happens like right when the season's starting. Pretty much always. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, right around the end of March.
I never get a chance to think about it, like what am I going to do? Plan anything, because like I am so deep in baseball as it's approaching, and then just suddenly it's here and it's like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, 39, if you're wondering. 39. So next year's the big one.
The big one. Everybody, please make sure to tweet at CBS Scott White on Friday afternoon, Friday morning, anytime on Friday. Show him some love. Happy birthday, Scott. Chris, how was opening day for you? I know you were at the Yankee game, and then you went to a fun little Eno Saris event. How was that?
Yeah, it was great. It was super cold. Like I was up in the left field upper deck, and
I told
basically everybody in my section was just like counting down the innings until the sun got to us. Because it was brutally cold. I was up there in my coat and gloves, drinking my black cherry seltzer with my gloves on because it was too cold to hold it with my bare hands. It's a good time. It's a good time. Got to see an Aaron Judge home run.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, good fun day.
Yeah, you got to see a Judge homer, Gleyber Torres socking a shoe,
met some FBT listeners at Other Half Brewing last night. So thanks to everybody who came and said hi. Always makes me feel super uncomfortable when people recognize me in public, but it's always fun. It's always nice to be recognized. So thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. You love to see it. Let's get things started with a little opening day overreaction. Let's start with the birthday boy. What do you have, Scott?
All right. So just to clarify, there are a lot of things we could overreact to. This is an overreaction that I'm not sure is an overreaction. I think it might be true. And it's that a breakout season for Brendan Donovan is forthcoming. Now, there are a few reasons why I say this, but let's start with what he did here on opening day. Batting in the leadoff spot, I'll point out, Tommy Edman was down hitting 9th. They had Brendan Donovan in the leadoff spot. He went 3 for 6 with a home run. All right, so already has a home run after hitting 5 all year as a rookie last year. That home run was his 3rd hardest hit ball of the day. He hit a ball 105 miles per hour apart from the home run, and he hit a ball 109 miles per hour. His hardest hit ball all of last year was 107 miles per hour. So he already has a career high here, game 1 of the season. I'll also point out that Brendan Donovan hit 4 home runs in spring training. So between spring training and the regular season now, 5 home runs in 2023 versus 5 that he hit in regular season play as a rookie last year. I forget exactly what research facility he was working with in the off season, but he basically figured out how to rip his hands through the zone faster. He started using a hockey puck style bat knob, and that allows him to, like I said, rip his hands through the zone faster, and like with the intention of hitting for more power. I think also he's using.
I would assume
bat.
I would assume it was the same one that Arenado and Goldschmidt went to, because they also use the puck style bat knob, if I'm remembering correctly. I know Goldschmidt does. I'm pretty sure Arenado.
Okay.
Both went to I think they both went to the same place last offseason. So I would assume, just being on the same team, that Brendan Donovan also went to the same place.
Now, Brendan Donovan wasn't a huge fantasy asset last year because he had just the 5 home runs. He had just 2 stolen bases, but he reached base at a 394 clip. He walked 60 times versus 70 strikeouts. Probably why he's batting leadoff for the Cardinals. If he has like 20 homer power all of a sudden, and early indications, I mean, you set a new max exit velocity on opening day. That's a pretty good sign that you've unlocked something new. If he has 20 homer power all of a sudden, he's like Alex Bregman, you know? So I think Brendan Donovan is somebody who is worth picking up. I mean, I tweeted about this and somebody asked if they should drop Taylor Ward for him. Okay, obviously not. But, you know, if you want to drop one of your last picks for Brendan Donovan, who happens to be 80% rostered in CBS Sports leagues, but I think that's just because there's so many points leagues on CBS Sports leagues. And as I said, he had great plate discipline last year. I imagine he's more available in other formats and triple eligible already. I believe third base, outfield, and second base, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think it's a move worth doing based on what we've seen from him between spring training and opening day.
And I will point out, you know, the first thing that I look at with a left-handed player is, what are the splits? He had 14 walks to 7 strikeouts and 77 plate appearances last season against lefties. Now, that's a very small sample size, 77 plate appearances, but he also had like an 809 OPS against lefties in 2021 in the minors. So seems like splits are not a huge concern here.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. And I'm looking over on Yahoo. Brendan Donovan is 63% rostered there. He has 5 different eligibilities, everything except for catcher, first, second, third, shortstop, and outfield. So especially if you play in some kind of daily lineup league on Yahoo, I mean, you can move this guy all around. Yeah, definitely make sure that Brendan Donovan is not a free agent and he's on your fantasy team. There was something else I wanted to mention. In spring training, I was watching a game where he hit a home run while Oliver Marmol, the manager for the Cardinals, was on the headset. And he talked about how Brendan Donovan is consciously trying to hit the ball with more force to the pull side and hit it in the air. His home run today was to the pull side. It was to right field. So just adding more fuel to the fire when it comes to Brendan Donovan. Chris, an overreaction from opening day. Let's start with the positive one.
Yeah, so we'll go with the confirmation bias edition overreaction, which is Pablo Lopez is him, which is a thing the kids say. I don't really understand it. I think it just means that he's good.
Yes.
And I think Pablo Lopez is good. And I thought that before he started throwing harder, but we saw it in the World Baseball Classic, and I thought, well, okay, maybe it was just adrenaline. He's pitching again in a big game against the Dominican Republic, but then we saw him, I think, pitch 1 inning in the spring in front of the Statcast cameras. Velocity was also up in that one, but again, 1 inning, too small of a sample size to say. Well, pitched 5 1/3 today through 85 pitches and averaged 95.1 miles per hour with his fastball, which is just about the hardest we've ever seen Pablo Lopez throw. He also had a sweeper. That's a new pitch for him. He got 8 whiffs with that one. I believe Pablo Lopez, at least heading into the late games, led all pitchers in whiffs today. I don't know if that's held up, but he had 17 of them. He might just have unlocked something himself. And this is a guy who has always been pretty good, but I think there's a chance that Pablo Lopez could be an even better version of himself moving forward with this new velocity. Obviously, I think he still has some injury concerns. There's a fairly lengthy track record with shoulder issues with Pablo Lopez, but certainly feeling pretty good about the shares of Pablo Lopez that I've got right now.
I wish I had more than one. Yeah, I wish they would just install StatCast at every spring training.
You know,
camp.
it would be really, because it's only in Arizona that they really don't exist. Most of the parks in Florida do. Arizona, all those parks are within like an hour driving. It should be easy to just install them. Get one guy with a van and a weekend, you know? Let's get this set up. Come on.
I love it. I love the call on Pablo Lopez for all the reasons you mentioned. This sweeper can really unlock a new level because the changeup was still really good in this start. He had 4 whiffs on that pitch. Fastball velo being up. Those 3 things in conjunction, velo, sweeper, changeup still being good, we could see a whole new version of Pablo Lopez that we've never seen before. Chris, your other overreaction note.
Oh, Dylan Cease is the best pitcher in baseball history, and we're the dumbest idiots in the history of dumb idiots. We specifically, I don't want you guys catching strays. You guys were not on the bold predictions part of the Dylan Cease.
We all have Cease as a bust.
You guys all have Cease, but specifically,
you were maybe the most sour.
The Chris's on the Bold Predictions podcast both had Dylan Cease. Chris Welsh said he'd be the 3rd best White Sox pitcher. I said he would finish with an ERA over 4. He will probably have to pitch pretty poorly from here on out to have an ERA over 4, because that first start was just about as good as you could hope for. And at least for one start, he made us look really dumb. 15 swings and misses, 6 1/3 inning, 10 strikeouts, 1 earned run, no walks against Houston. A very, very good Houston lineup.
No, something I wanted to push back on that, Chris, is that
it's not,
they are dealing with injuries right now, and the 6 through 9 in that lineup is very unproven and is not very good. It's still really impressive. I'm not taking anything away from Cease, but the bottom half of that lineup is not normal.
Yanier Diaz, Jake Myers, Martin Maldonado, Mauricio Dubon is the 6 through 9 in that lineup. So and they all went 1 for, 14, 13, whatever those numbers add up to. So, he took advantage of that, but also multiple strikeouts each for Jeremy Pena, Alex Bregman, Yordan Alvarez, and just those 3.
All right, I want to say a couple things here too, because first of all, I mean, the basic take with Dylan Cease was, at his cost, the risk is too much for me. Understandably, he led the majors in walks last year. That is a potential deal breaker for a pitcher. But of course, he was going to be a big source of strikeouts. Of course, he was going to have some great starts. I don't think any of us doubted that. But I will also say this. He walked 0 in this game. Obviously, the big concern for me was walks with Dylan Cease. He walked 0 in this game. He had only 1 start last year where he walked 0 batters. I went through the game log for Dylan Cease. There were 4 to 6 starts he made last year that were at least in the discussion for being about as good as this one. 4 to 6. Which, okay, how many great starts can a pitcher have in a season? But it was 4 to 6 like this for Cease in a year where he had a 2.20 ERA. So on the one hand, I don't want to overrate one start. On the other hand, this was a especially good start that, maybe he only has 3 or 4 like it again all year. But I think especially when you consider he didn't walk anybody, he threw 72% of his pitches for strikes. And as I said, that was his biggest concern for me going in. It may be the first indication that he's going to take another step forward. And if he does take a step forward, like if control becomes a non-issue for Dylan Cease, then
the sky's the limit.
Cy Young contender.
Yeah, I mean, he was a Cy Young contender last year, and that was with leading baseball and walks. So
perennial.
not taking anything away from him. This was a fantastic start. Everything was working. Fastball, command, slider, curveball, everything was awesome for him. He had 15 swinging strikes on 86 pitches. So again, not taking anything away. But let's see if he can continue that type of control. And for everyone like with the tweets and everything, I don't mind some playful banter and all this stuff. But if you're going to tweet at us like 3 or 4 times the same thing over and over again, it's like, dude, the season is really, really long. It's one day. Like, whatever. I don't care if I come off as whiny. It's just like, you guys are jerks, whoever was doing that. But anyone else, if you want to have fun, like, that's fine. We can have fun with it. But like, dude, don't just keep tweeting at me the same thing. It's just annoying. My overreaction from opening day, I want to highlight 2 hitters here who very much so look like they could be on the verge of a breakout. The first one's Adley Rutschman, who I think anytime we talked about the catcher position, the catcher I was avoiding, I probably mentioned Travis d'Arnaud, who also had a great game. But I feel like I mentioned Adley Rutschman as someone who might be overvalued because I don't know if the power is going to be there yet in his second season. But he looked pretty awesome on opening day. He went 5 for 5 with a home run, 4 RBI, a 400-foot home run in Fenway Park to right field. I mean, that's pretty impressive for Adley Rutschman. So my overreaction is that I could be dead wrong, and maybe he goes out and hits like 25 home runs and he's the best catcher in fantasy. It would not surprise me given the prospect pedigree with Adley Rutschman. And the other one is Alec Bohm, who, you know, we talked about a lot throughout spring, and he was doing some nice things. He was lifting the ball. He was hitting some home runs. 3 for 4 on opening day, a home run and a double off Jacob deGrom. Now, obviously, like, once you consider the entire start for deGrom, it wasn't a good start for him. He didn't give up that much hard contact, except against Alec Bohm. Like, Bohm was just really good in this game, and specifically against one of, you know, what we think as one of the best pitchers on the planet in Jacob deGrom.
All 4 of Bohm's batted balls today were 95 miles per hour or more.
Yeah. I mean, the breakout could be imminent here for Alec Bohm. So if you missed out early and you managed to pick up Alec Bohm later on in your drafts, you might be just fine at the third base position. So another overreaction. We'll see how far those 2 guys can take it. Adley Rutschman and Alec Bohm, awesome on opening day. Let's take our no, let's not take our first break yet because I don't have anything loaded up here. Let's talk about a few of these. No, where I want to go. Steals. Let's quickly talk about steals.
Quickly,
yeah. I mean, however long you want to talk, because we could talk for a long time. We knew coming into the season that steals were going to be up, and we had an idea, throughout spring training, they were up 25 to 30%. All right, maybe dating back to the early 2000s, we had some data on that. Last opening day, there were 5 stolen bases. Right now, we're recording this 12:48 a.m. Games are still going on, so maybe this number has changed. 23 steals and counting.
Almost 5-fold.
It is insane what we saw. I mean, specifically the Orioles, they had 5 steals by themselves, 2 for Jorge Mateo. Maybe we kind of buried him too quickly too, because I mean, if they're going to be aggressive on the base paths, Mateo could steal, 40, 50 bases this year. Cedric Mullins had 2. Adam Frazier stole a base. Tyro Estrada stole 1. Starling Marte, he stole a base, and he stole a few in the spring too. So feeling pretty good about Marte so far. I'm sure there were a bunch of other players that I just didn't write down who stole bases, but Scott, any early takes here on what we saw opening day? 23 steals and counting.
I mean, I don't think there are going to be 5 times as many stolen bases as there were last year. I did say multiple times in the off season that I think it would blow people's minds how much stolen bases would increase. And one day in, I think I think that's proving accurate so far. I do think it's notable that, and I'm checking the late games box scores. I think they just ended. Like that, I don't recall seeing Ryan McMahon had a stolen base, but almost all of the stolen bases were from guys who we consider base stealers in one manner or another. Paul Goldschmidt had a stolen base, I know, but we've seen him do that before. Not so much last year, but 2 years ago, he had a decent number. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I was kind of counting on it being a wider distribution as opposed to being concentrated to those who we already think of as base stealers. And one day in, it seemed to go mostly to the base stealers, the big base stealers. They're going to steal more bases, so maybe there's nothing to that, but it is something I wanted to point out. Also, and let me see if I can get a quick count of the home runs in the West Coast games. There were 4, so there were 20 total home runs today. versus how many steals did you say, Frank?
23.
23.
Yeah. So the fact that the steals are outpacing the home runs, I don't even remember the last time there was a season where there were more stolen bases than home runs. Again, that doesn't mean it's going to happen this year, but players seem motivated to run as we could have hoped for. The first base runner of the season was Ronald Acuna, and I happened to be watching it. He's taken a big lead right away. He gets 2 quick disengagements out of Patrick Corbin, 2 quick throws over to first base. And after the second one, he starts like, I don't know exactly who he's gesturing at, but you can tell the thought process is that was 2, right? Like, I don't have to worry about him throwing over again. And he was taking the same big lead, but he was clearly leaning towards second base. And actually he tripped when he first started running. The first time he tried to steal, he tripped, so he had to go back to first base. But then on the second one, like, he took off and stole it pretty easily. So like that was like the very first base runner of the season with the new rules. We saw the disengagements come into play, and I didn't see all of these steals attempts, but I imagine that was something that was happening in games all around the league.
I was watching the Mets and the Marlins play, and Max Scherzer did the same thing with Gene Segura. He threw over 2 times. The very next pitch, Gene Segura got like a running lead and then just took off. And then I think it was a foul ball, so he came back and then he didn't run again after that. So I thought it was kind of weird. That
also a very, very funny situation with the pickoff rules where I can't remember which pitcher it was for the Giants. I think it was Logan Webb. He just seemed to get in his head. He like stepped off the mound and was like rushing himself. And like immediately at the start of, I think, the next pitch clock, he throws over to first to try to pick off Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe's standing on first base when he threw over. Logan Webb looked a little thrown off by the whole situation, but that was a very funny situation. By the way, I looked it up. 1992 is the last time that there were more stolen bases than home runs in the majors.
Were you even alive, Frank, in 1992?
Would you like to take a guess on how old I was, Scott?
I'll say 1.
1. Yeah, I'll go with 1. It's a good guess.
That's right. I was 1 year old, baby. Let's go. 1992.
Yeah, that's the last time. And yeah, it happened pretty regularly in the 80s. I don't think we're expecting a 1980s-esque amount of steals or home runs, frankly. But that's interesting. Also, just apropos of nothing, but 1987, 4,458 home runs in the majors. 1988, 3,180. Don't know what happened there. Probably a juice ball thing.
All right, well, let's take our first break here. When we get back, we'll talk about some of the injuries on fantasy baseball today.
Hey, Calvin, you play golf. You think you can win one of those green jackets at the Masters?
Well, if it's for being the most loving neighbor of the year, yes.
It's a tradition unlike any other. The Masters on CBS.
So just as we're getting set for opening day to begin, we get news that Justin Verlander was placed on the IL with a low-grade teres major strain, which is something near the armpit or the shoulder area. It's something.
Isn't it what Tristan McKenzie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Same exact thing there. They did say it was minor, for whatever that's worth, and that Justin Verlander will continue throwing at moderate intensity. Tyler McGill will step into the Mets rotation and start on Saturday. Any interest in Tyler McGill in the short term?
I mean, more. My interest level is more about monitoring him to see how he does. He's flashed signs of potential in the past, and I could be open to picking him up if he looks good. But at this stage of the season, it's not something I'm going to do outside of very deep leagues.
10% rostered is Tyler McGill, and if you play in a deep league, I think that's exactly where you should be looking for him. Let's see what he does on Saturday. But obviously, pitches for a really good team and does have some upside. That is Tyler McGill.
And just like on the subject of Verlander, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a long-term issue. It's the same injury that that Tristan McKenzie suffered, and he's out 2 months, but it's lower intensity. He's going to continue moderate throwing throughout his time on the IL. So hopefully it's just a short-term absence for him.
Scott, I can't be mean to you because it's your birthday, but I did say all that stuff.
You did say all that. Man, you said it so efficiently.
Yeah, I guess so. Max Fried left his start with a left hamstring injury. He will definitely miss his next scheduled start and could still land on the 15-day IL.
We got to get this guy on like a yoga program or something, because basically the exact same thing happened in 2021. I don't think it was his very first start of that season, but remember, he missed, looks like about 3.5 weeks with a hamstring injury in 2021 very early on. It was on March 14th. So probably like his third start, but like, come on, Max, let's stretch. I know it's cold out there, but let's try to get ready for the season.
Scott, what happens in the meantime here? Schuster, we know, is in the rotation. Dylan Dodd is there. I guess if they need another fifth starter, I don't think that they would accelerate things with Kyle Wright. Is there someone else to pay attention to?
Well, I mean, it wasn't expected that Jared Schuster or Dylan Dodd would make the rotation. It was expected to be a competition between Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder, and Mike Soroka. So I suppose one of them would fill in for Max Fried. And if Kyle Wright makes it back before Fried, then that gives Dodd and Schuster a chance to stick around longer. I think the Braves are only saying for sure Fried will miss one start. I imagine it probably won't be more than 2, but I don't think we've gotten an official grade measurement on the
schedule. The schedule is not very helpful for the Braves in this instance. They are off tomorrow, Friday, as you're listening to this, but then they don't have another day off until the 13th. So they basically have to go 2.5 turns through the rotation without a day off. So this is not a situation where they can just keep everyone on regular rest and avoid it. They will, likely have to get someone to fill in for at least a couple turns in the rotation if Fried goes on the IL.
This next one is not an injury, but Daniel Bard will go on the IL as he deals with anxiety. Didn't appear in a game between 2014 and 2019 while dealing with the yips and some mental struggles that kept him out of the game during that time. So, obviously wishing the best for Daniel Bard. But, the next question will be, what happens in the Rockies bullpen, and a few names that I guess we could speculate on in deeper leagues. Dinelson Lamet, Pierce Johnson, Brad Hand, we know has experience, but hasn't really been great the past couple of years. Somebody named Justin Lawrence had 13 strikeouts to 3 walks over 7 1/3 innings this spring. And I saw a pitching ninja slider of his, and it's like a Frisbee. That thing just flies across the zone. So that's kind of interesting. On opening day, they were pitching with a 7-2 lead, and they went to Dinelson Lamet in the 7th, Justin Lawrence in the 8th, and somebody named Jake Bird in the 9th inning. What do you guys think happens with the Rockies bullpen?
Well, I mean, based on that usage, I'm going to rule out Dinelson Lamet as the guy I want to pick up. I think it's going to be a committee to start out, and not a very attractive one. Pierce Johnson is probably the one to pick up if you have to pick up somebody. And maybe if it becomes a long-term absence, somebody like Justin Lawrence can get a chance to step into the role more permanently. It's the sort of thing with Bard where, obviously there's no timetable. His bout with the yips earlier in his career, I mean, he was out of baseball for like 6 years. So, but at the same time, I saw Bud Black, the Rockies manager, and those on the Rockies beat saying, "Oh yeah, he'll just take a step back for a couple weeks." And I don't know. That seems like a rosy outlook to me. Obviously, if you have an IL spot and saves are valuable in your league, saves are scarce, then I think you just have to stash Bard away for now. But there will come a point where if he's showing no signs of returning, where you're just going to have to move on.
All right, let's rush through the rest of these injuries I have written down. Jorge Polanco was officially placed on the IL, and here's what the Twins head trainer had to say. Quote, "I think the one thing that we all need to be cognizant of is that Jorge hasn't had a spring training this year, and a smart thing, I think the wise thing to do is to allow him to progress along like we have allowed the 26 guys that are on our team to do, basically." So it sounds like there's no time period here, and it's gonna, not only does he have to ramp back up, he's gonna have to do some kind of extended spring training or minor league rehab stint. So I don't know. I think we're looking at quite a bit here for Jorge Polanco. Ryan Pepio was placed on the IL with a left oblique strain. Michael Grove will enter the Dodgers rotation. Any interest in deeper leagues?
I mean, only.
Would you rather speculate on Michael Grove or Tyler McGill?
McGill.
I think Miguel, yeah.
Okay.
Unless it's a short-term play, because Grove has 2 starts next week. They're pretty good matchups.
Wilson Contreras exited opening day with a right knee contusion, and apparently will have an MRI coming on Friday. Doesn't say what day, but coming soon. Giovanni Gallegos is day-to-day with lower back tightness. Luis Arias limped off the field in the 9th inning with a left hamstring injury. Just speculation on my part, but if Arias does need to go on the IL, maybe Brian Anderson goes back to third base, and maybe one of those interesting outfield prospects gets a shot, someone like Joey Weimer or Sal Frelick.
I would say that's a very likely scenario.
Yeah.
If Arias does have to go on the IL. I'm not sure which it would be, though. Like, I feel like it should be Frelick, but I feel like Frelick should have gotten the first shot over Garrett Mitchell, too. So,
one thing, I do want to go back to the Dodgers for just a second, because it is worth mentioning, and not really a name that we talked about much in the spring. I don't know if Gavin Stone had a scoreless 6 2/3 with 14 strikeouts.
Yeah,
in the
he had
spring.
one relief appearance. It was like 3 innings, and he got 8 strikeouts.
That's he's got bonkers, like video game kind of numbers. 1.92 ERA between 3 levels of the minors last season, 1.118 WHIP. Walks are a little high-ish for a high-level starting pitcher prospect, but 12 strikeouts per inning in both AA and AAA. I would guess that he's probably another injury away from even being in the discussion to get called up, but
you just sold him short, Chris. It was a 1.48 ERA between 3 levels. 1.92 was his run average.
Oh, sorry.
Average.
Yeah, I read the wrong column there. Yeah, he had an awesome spring. He's, I think, at this point, pretty clearly the Dodgers' top pitching prospect, right? And
between him and Bobby Miller, but I prefer Stone.
Someone to definitely keep an eye on if you're if you're in a deep league, because he definitely could be next in line if something happens for a Dodgers pitcher.
And a Dodgers rotation that features Clayton Kershaw and Noah Syndergaard. So these are guys that have dealt with injuries in the past. I would say outside of Grayson Rodriguez, Hunter Brown, and Brendan Pfaadt, Gavin Stone is the next pitching prospect that I think can make an impact this season in fantasy baseball. Adalberto Mondesi was placed on the 60-day IL as he rehabs that ACL injury. And at this point, it kind of feels like Trevor Story is going to beat Mondesi back.
You know who also is probably going to beat him back? Jose Altuve was not placed on the 60-day IL. We did not mention that one yet, right?
No, I did not. I had it later on, but I mean, there's so much stuff on this opening day rundown. Let's get back into some of the action that happened, and we'll talk about some news and notes later on. Way too early waiver wire hitter decisions. What if you need a catcher in a 1-catcher league? Some interesting performances on opening day. Travis d'Arnaud went 4 for 5 with a double, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. He was in there as the DH against a left-handed pitcher in Patrick Corbin. Yasmani Grandal went 1 for 4 with a home run. It was a go-ahead home run, right? At the time, yeah, go-ahead home run in that game against the Astros, 70% rostered. Who would you guys rather have, TDA or Grandal?
I'd rather have Grandal, I think. But this was a performance from Travis d'Arnaud that kind of made me second-guess things. I had shied away from him toward the end of draft prep season because Marcell Ozuna and Eddie Rosario looked promising enough this spring that I thought they'd get a chance to play left field and DH respectively for the Braves, which would leave d'Arnaud as primarily a backup catcher. As you pointed out, there was a left-hander on the mound, and so maybe it's a situation where Rosario in left field, Ozuna at DH against righties, and against lefties, Ozuna in left field, d'Arnaud in DH, and maybe the Braves just stick with that. d'Arnaud obviously getting backup starts at catcher sometimes too, but he was the offensive star for them today. And I wonder if they facing a right-hander in their next game Saturday, if Brian Snitker doesn't just stick with him, in which case, I don't know, there may be more potential for at-bats here with d'Arnaud than I thought, is what I'm saying.
James Outlet
And if it happens, then I do prefer him to Grandal.
James Outman had a big game here on opening day. He went 2 for 3 with a home run, a walk, 2 RBI, and 3 runs scored. So nice little game here for Outman. He is 39% rostered. He had a huge season in the minors last year. He's a little bit older for a prospect, but in this Dodgers lineup with some power and some speed, Chris, I am really, really interested. Like I was already pretty, like my interest was peaked coming into opening day, but like a game like this, I'm like, I don't know. He might be a must add. What do you think about James Outman, 39% rostered?
Now your interest is peaking.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm terrible. Yeah, no, we probably wrote him. I think we had like one point where we discussed him on the podcast, and I think we were all kind of a little bit too dismissive of him. 31 home runs, 13 steals, 125 games. A lot of swing and miss there, but you know there does seem to be a pretty interesting skill set. Obviously, because he's a lefty on the Dodgers, and especially a young, unproven one, there's a decent chance that he's a platoon player to start the season. But
that's the thing. Is
definitely opening eyes.
I couldn't make sense of how the Dodgers were going to set up their outfield. You know, Jason Hayward there, who's a left-handed hitter, and I think throughout the preseason, Roster Resource had Trace Thompson set up in center field, a right-handed hitter, which, you know,
as a platoon bat, yeah.
I didn't think that was gonna, like, I didn't see him. Okay, so it's changed now. So Jason Martinez, who runs Roster Resources, now put James Outman in as the center fielder over Trace Thompson. And if that's how it plays out, if Outman is the better half of a platoon, then I agree. He's very interesting.
Well, and I mean, David Peralta's the left fielder. It's not a knock on David Peralta necessarily, but that's not necessarily the most secure player of all time to have in your starting lineup. So there's a path to playing time for James Outman. I would guess that whenever the first time they face a lefty is, he will be on the bench. But you know, it's entirely possible that he ends up forcing his way into a pretty big role. And yeah, I think I think in your like 12-team points leagues, 3 outfielders, James Outman's not worth a look, but you know, 5 outfielder league, sure.
Yeah, I was going to say any 5 outfielder league, I think James Outman probably should be rostered. I found, 3 names that are rostered in more leagues than him right now that I think I would drop for him. Mark Canha is 49% rostered. Austin Hayes is 51% rostered. And who was the other one? Mike Yastrzemski, 62%. Would you drop all 3 of those?
Yastrzemski, yes. If it's a deep rotisserie league where you kind of need to make sure you're getting at bats, then you probably have to hold on to Austin Hayes. And who was the first one you said?
Mark Canha,
yeah, over Outman. But if it's more like a 12-team 5 outfielder league, you can sell it a little harder for upside. Then yes, I think swapping them out for Outman makes sense.
All right, let's move over to corner infield. Spencer Steer went 1 for 2 with a home run and 2 walks.
Yeah, baby.
Chris, I feel like you have him everywhere, so shout out to you. Eleuteris Montero went 2 for 5 with a home run and 3 strikeouts. Garrett Cooper went 1 for 4 with a 2-run homer off of Max Scherzer. He had 2 great at-bats against Scherzer. I think one was like an 8 or 10 pitch at-bat where he was just fouling everything off. The very next plate appearance was the one that he hit a home run, and it was straight away center field. So I was pretty impressed by what I saw from Garrett Cooper. How do you guys rank those 3 corner infielders? Steer, Montero, Cooper?
I think it depends what you need, because like Cooper's a really good hitter. He just cannot stay healthy. It's just at every point in his career, even going back to the minors, he's had injury issues. So if I need a starter right now, I think I'd rather start Garrett Cooper than Spencer Steer or Eleuteris Montero. But long term,
Cooper hit 9 home runs and 469 plate appearances last year.
He doesn't have a ton of over the fence power. Sure. He's a good hitter though.
I would go exactly how you listed them, Frank. Steer, Montero, Cooper. Yeah. And I would have Cooper as a distant third. I'm basically in every roto league. I would try to have Steer and Montero if they're available. Steer, that home run he hit today.
435.
435 to straightaway. Like, I didn't even know he had that kind of power. I thought it was like Jonathan India level power where, okay, he hits it to his pull side in Cincinnati. Maybe Steer could approach 20 homers, but that home run he hit today makes me hope for even more.
Some deep league thoughts. What about these names? Robbie Grossman went 1 for 3 with a 3-run homer off of Aaron Nola. He is 1 year removed from going 2020. So in a deeper league 4% roster, I think he's a little interesting. Ji-Hwan Bae for the Pirates went 2 for 3 with a double, a walk, 2 steals, and 2 runs scored. Last year at AAA, he hit .289 with 30 steals in 108 games. In his limited time with the Pirates last year, 90th percentile sprint speed, only 2% rostered. I think they might just let this guy run a little bit. So Robbie Grossman, Ji-Hwan Bae in deeper leagues. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, if it's depending how deep it is, I could see Bae being a steal specialist. He probably won't play much against lefties. So you're talking about mostly just steals and only part of the time. But if it's a deep enough league where that's of interest to you, that's somebody we haven't spoken of before who may have some utility.
And for what it's worth, Ji-Hwan Bae did have decent numbers against lefties in the minors last year. I don't know how much to take from that, but it's worth noting. It was actually slightly better against lefties than the righties with decent strikeout and walk rates. So, interesting player, I think.
Chris, if Ji-Hwan Bae becomes a thing, I'm going to create a sound drop of the song "A Bay Bay" by Hurricane Chris. Are you down with that? I feel like you know the reference.
I don't know if I know that one.
What, really? All right.
I was thinking I think there's a No Doubt song with I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
All right, well, we'll workshop.
That's before your time.
Hopefully he does become a thing. Let's take our second break and get into everything else here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
Meanwhile, on Paramount Mountain.
Okay, we have the northern face, the southern face, and
the Sylvester Stallone face. Of course.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
Is that Dad? Yeah.
No, don't sneeze.
Dear God, no.
Hold it.
hold it.
Don't do it.
No!
Ha! Gesundheit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A few other news and notes worth mentioning. The Astros GM Dana Brown said Yordan Alvarez will not be an everyday player to begin the season. Apparently his hand is pain-free, but they want to play it safe. I don't know. After hitting a 442-foot home run off Ronaldo Lopez, maybe they'll change their stance. Who knows? Jose Altuve is optimistic that he could be back before June. He was placed on the 10-day IL, not the 60-day IL after all. Chris mentioned that earlier. Jurickson Profar will remain at extended spring training for a stretch of tune-up games before joining the Rockies. Hunter Brown will start Monday against the Tigers. According to Evan Grant, who covers the Rangers for the Dallas Morning News, Jose Leclerc is likely to see the first save opportunity for the Rangers. And in fact, Leclerc pitched the 9th inning with a 4-run lead on Thursday. Esteury Ruiz is expected to serve as the everyday center fielder for the A's, with Christian Pache getting traded away. Johnny Brito was recalled by the Yankees and will start on Sunday against the Giants. Domingo Germán was pushed back by a few days. I had a few lineup notes. I'll just quickly run through these. If there's anything especially interesting that you guys want to talk about, just interrupt and we'll talk about it. For the Braves against left-handed pitching, Ozzie Albies was batting cleanup. Michael Harris was batting 7th. Marcell Ozuna in left field. Travis d'Arnaud at DH with no Eddie Rosario. For the Giants versus right-handed pitching, Lamont Wade was hitting leadoff. Blake Sable was in left field, batting 8th. For the Yankees,
he got pinch hit for.
He did,
though, after 2 at bats when they brought a lefty in. So, yeah, I mean, the still unclear how much Sable's actually going to play.
I mean, the Giants don't really have any everyday players, so yeah, it's kind of tough.
For the Yankees versus right-handed pitching, Oswaldo Cabrera was in left field, and apparently he will play a lot versus right-handed pitching. Also had 4 strikeouts in that game, so not the best opening day for him. Anthony Volpe was batting 9th in his debut. For the Red Sox versus a righty, Alex Verdugo was hitting leadoff, Masataka Yoshida was cleanup, and Tristan Casas was batting 6th.
I did want to mention for Yoshida, who went 2 for 4 with 2 singles, right? So he didn't. – it's not like he showed a lot of power, but exit velocities for him were, hang on a second. Do I have the right?
97.9, 99.8, 100.5, and 108.4.
There you go. There you go. So the lowest exit velocity of his 4 batted balls was what?
97.9.
There you go. That's the stat I was looking for. Thank you for the assist. So that's, Masataka Yoshida clearly has some raw power. I don't know if he's going to elevate the ball in the most optimal way to make good on it, but that was an encouraging first sign.
The Cubs were up against a righty, and Miles Mastrobuoni hit ninth. Trey Mancini was at DH. No Edwin Rios in the lineup. Tigers against a lefty. Matt Vierling hit leadoff. Austin Meadows was batting sixth. For Tampa Bay versus a lefty, Isaac Paredes hit third in the lineup. Brandon Lau was down at seventh. For the Cardinals against a righty, Brendan Donovan hit leadoff. Lars Nootbaar second. Nolan Gorman was the DH batting seventh. Jordan Walker bat eighth. And Tommy Edman was ninth.
Edman ninth is kind of significant. I mean, I still think like he's a pretty good player, and if he plays every day and hits ninth, he'll have decent numbers. But like, there is a huge difference between the number of plate appearances you get hitting leadoff or second or whatever and batting ninth. I mean, you're talking about generally in most lineups, you're talking over the course of the season about 18 to 20 plate appearance difference for each spot you go down in the lineup. So like first to fourth, not a big difference. First to ninth, huge difference. I mean, you're talking about potentially 150, 160 plate appearance loss there if it lasts for the whole season. Now, we don't know what it's going to look like. It's day one. Always worth remembering, any discussion of lineups is a snapshot of one day in a 162 game season. So,
and specifically in Edmonds' case, I did see talk at the end of spring training that they probably would still bat him lead off against lefties.
Mm-hmm.
So that would help mitigate some of the loss there. But yeah, it's if you invested in Tommy Edman, it's not an encouraging sign. And considering how much Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar got on base at 1 and 2 today, I doubt the Cardinals are second guessing it yet.
For the Marlins against a righty, Jazz Chisholm was batting cleanup. Brian De La Cruz was seventh. For the White Sox against a lefty on the mound, no Oscar Colas. Romy Gonzalez hit ninth and was in right field.
Colas came off the bench and hit a 109.4 mile per hour single.
Sure did. That was a screamer. I saw it live. I was like, whoa, who hit that? Oscar Colas did. For the Astros against a righty, Jeremy Pena hit leadoff. Yainer Diaz was the DH and was batting sixth. Mauricio Dubon was at second with Framber Valdez on the mound, regarded as the better defensive second baseman. For the Rockies against the lefty, Ellie Harris Montero was at third base batting fifth. Ezekiel Tovar hit ninth. For the Padres against the righty, Trent Grisham hit leadoff. Matt Carpenter was sixth. Ha-Sung Kim was batting eighth. For the Diamondbacks against a lefty, Kyle Lewis was the leadoff hitter. He was the DH as well. Corbin Carroll was down at 7, and Jake McCarthy hit ninth. I have a feeling against righties, they'll probably use Carroll as the leadoff hitter, but at least for now, going to be a little bit lower against.
Can I add one?
Sure.
Dalton Varsho hit cleanup for the Blue Jays. It was against a righty, and he's someone who has pretty substantial platoon splits, but for a guy who's catcher eligible, who figures to have a significant edge on most catchers in playing time, batting cleanup for the Blue Jays could be pretty big. He had a double. It was, I believe, the hardest hit ball of his major league career. It was 112.5 miles per hour. He had never had one over 111. So that was an interesting sign. And yeah, if he hits cleanup all year, Scott, you were talking a lot about Salvador Perez being like a clear edge in RBI. Varsho could get there if he's batting cleanup all year
and playing regularly enough.
And playing regularly, so he's got to be better against lefties, especially than he was last year for sure.
Just to recap the rookies, Frank, here. So Corbin Carroll hit 7th, Jordan Walker hit 8th, Anthony Volpe 9th, Ezekiel Tovar 9th, Oscar Colas out of the lineup. So they're gonna have to hit their way up, it seems.
Yeah, which is pretty standard.
I'm pretty sure Gunnar Henderson was in the middle of his lineup for whatever it's worth. So I think
you mentioned Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
7th. Yeah.
Gunnar Henderson was either 5th or 6th. He was the DH too. Kind of weird, just not playing the field. For the Guardians against the righty, no Oscar Gonzalez. Okay. Will Brennan hit 7th in the lineup. So
Got to get Will Brennan in the lineup, you know?
you got to do it. He does have a little bit of prospect pedigree. Oh, man. There's a lot to get to. I'm just going to kind of jump around a little bit, and we'll figure out what we want to do. Some fun hitting standouts from opening day. Aaron Judge, his very first at bat, 422-foot home run. New year, same Aaron Judge. Your first sock in the shoe of the season goes to Gleyber Torres. 1 for 3 with an opposite field home run. Also had a walk and a steal. It's a contract year. Maybe some extra motivation there for Gleyber Torres. And we are sticking with sock in the shoe, by the way. I tweeted out.
Oh, yeah.
People are pushing back. Oh, what?
It's catching on.
You got to get rid of sock in the shoe.
The streets are ablaze.
I've been seeing it in places that have nothing to do with us. This is more than just a bit now.
Can't stop this. You can't stop this momentum.
You cannot. Some people said combo meal, but that's a shout out to the ESPN Fantasy Baseball podcast back in the day. So we wanted to come up with our own little thing, and so we're gonna go with that sock and a shoe. We mentioned Adley, Rutschman, CJ Crone, double dong on the road. Okay, 4 hard hit balls after a spring where he was banged up and did not look good. Okay, did not see that one coming. Ty France went 3 for 4 with 3 RBI. Austin Meadows went 3 for 4. 2 of those hits coming off of Shane McClanahan. So left on left. Don't usually see good numbers for Austin Meadows there. Maybe a little revenge factor against the Tampa Bay Rays. O'Neal Cruz, Chris, you love to see it.
Oh my goodness!
With 2 walks, 2 runs scored, a home run off of and a very long home run against Hunter Green. Basically his pitching counterpart. So hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Green still looked like the not quite fully realized version of Hunter Green. He did not throw a changeup today. So, he averaged 100.4 miles per hour with his fastball, which is this dude averaged 98.9 miles per hour with his fastball, and it was up 1.5 mile per hour today. But it wasn't great. So, still some work to do. But yeah, man, O'Neal Cruz, that was impressive. That was just one of those ones where it was like chest high, and I don't think it got any higher as it went off the bat. It was just like chest high missile out to right field. It was incredible.
And I am encouraged by the 2 walks too, because we only saw a 7.8% walk rate last year from O'Neal Cruz. So love to see that on opening day.
No strikeouts.
Yeah.
Love to see it.
Slobber knocker of opening day goes to the Blue Jays and the Cardinals. They combined for 19 runs on 34 hits. George Springer, 5 hits in this game, all singles. All right. 4 runs scored and an RBI for him. Bo Bichette went 4 for 6. He had a double and 2 runs scored. We spoke about Brendan Donovan earlier. Tyler O'Neill, another one of our bust picks. He went 1 for 4 with a home run. Didn't get any tweets about him. If you want to send them my way, feel free. What happened to the pitchers in this game? Miles Michaelis, 10 hits allowed, 5 runs, 91 mile per hour average exit velocity against. On the other side, Alec Manoah, 3 1/3, 5 runs, 2 home runs allowed. Still had 12 swinging strikes. And his average exit velocity was actually pretty low. So maybe it was just
85.7.
He gave up the home runs and, not really much else. But hey, I mean, 2 home runs, that'll do it.
Yeah, that's what he said. He just left a couple balls over the plate and gave up some home runs. I'm not really worried about Alec Manoah. It was a day where a lot of good pitchers had really bad starts. We talked about Austin Nola and Jacob deGrom earlier. Alec Manoah.
Aaron Nola.
Of course. Yeah, Aaron Nola. Alec Manoah. There were some good starts too, obviously, but a lot of bad starts. And I saw some chatter about it being because the shifts were gone. More, obviously more balls finding holes, more base runners. And is this going to have a more detrimental impact on pitching than we thought?
It's way too early to have that discussion.
Yes, I agree. And based on what we saw from spring training, I don't feel like there was a lot of evidence for that in spring training. But I did happen to look into one thing that I thought was worth sharing. So how many home runs total were hit again? I'd have to recalculate. Let's just say leading into the 4 West Coast games. So the first 11 games today, the amount of runs scored per home run hit I don't mean this many runs were scored on every home run. I just mean home runs, runs scored relative to home runs hit was 6.4 today. Last year, it was 4.0. So a lot of runs were being scored here on opening day that weren't home runs. A lot more than we're used to seeing over the course of last year. Of course, we're talking a sample of one day, but again, I thought it was notable. I don't think it's going to be an issue for pitching in general, but it was notable.
The thought would be behind all the rule changes that Major League Baseball has implemented that the game would become less reliant on home runs for scoring. That's been the long-term trend, is that home runs have made up an increasingly large percentage of the total runs scored. And that would be what MLB wants. But I still think like it's too early to have that discussion. I think, I definitely saw multiple instances of guys hitting well-hit balls right up the middle that were still turned into outs because there was a guy standing right behind second base. So,
but I also
there was also the very funny
plenty of instances of not so hard hit balls just sneaking past two defenders, sneaking in between two defenders. I did see several examples of that today where I thought that might not have been a hit last year.
The Royals did try the two outfielder defense against Joey Gallo with converted catcher MJ Melendez effectively playing what last year would have been second base on the shift. And he got eaten up by the ground ball and could not make it work. So that's actually like an under discussed aspect of this, is that like teams are going to have to put guys who are not used to playing in the infield to play this, the shift if they want to replicate last year's shift. And
if they want to do it,
to keep, if they want, and I
want to do it that much.
I think it's only really going to happen to Joey Gallo. I think it's just kind of like a big joke and everybody's in on it, and we're all just going to keep trying to shift Joey Gallo no matter what.
I have a few groups. Go ahead, Scott.
I did want to say, just on the subject of bad pitchers too, the only one that really raised a lot of concern for me was Miles Michaelis, who had the worst start of any of them, 5 earned runs on 10 hits in 3 1/3 innings. He had one start last year that was worse than this, actually way worse than this at Coors Field. I calculated Michaelis's numbers if you took out that one bad start at Coors last year, and it's funny how good his final tally would have looked. But his velocity was down on the slider. He gave up 91 mile per hour average exit velocity, which isn't terrible, but it's definitely worse than we're used to seeing from Miles Michaelis. And just the fact that he's not the same caliber of pitcher as most of the ones who struggled today, as DeGrom or Manoah or any of them. Yeah. I'm not dropping Michaelis now, but if he doesn't show signs of turning around within the next start or two, it's going to be a pretty short hook.
Yeah, he's a guy who needs to produce, or else there's not enough upside to wait it out,
Let's quickly hit a few groups of pitchers that I put together here. Studs being studs. Garrett Cole had 11 strikeouts against the Giants. Shane McClanahan, 6 shutout with 6 strikeouts against the Tigers. Shane Bieber and Luis Castillo had themselves a little pitcher's duel. Bieber, 6 shutout with only 3 strikeouts. With Castillo, 6 shutout with 6 strikeouts on the other side. Shohei Ohtani doing Ohtani things, 6 shutout with 10 strikeouts. Chris, anything that stood out with any of those? Ohtani, Bieber, Castillo, McClanahan, and Cole.
Shane Bieber's velocity continues to trickle down, and he was still effective, so I don't think we're worried about it. But, I do wonder if at some point there's going to be a breaking point with Shane Bieber, but I don't think we're there. It wasn't down a ton. It was half a tick on the fastball, a little bit more on the secondaries.
His opposing pitcher, Luis Castillo, was down 1 mile per hour and a half. So, between the two of them, Bieber lost less velocity on a 54-degree day in Seattle.
Luis Castillo famously hates the cold weather.
Yeah, that is true. And usually a slow starter in terms of velocity. He kind of builds up a little bit. So
Cole was inefficient early on. The fact that he ended up getting 6 shutout innings was kind of remarkable, because I think he was at 46 pitches through the first 2 innings. He was kind of wild. He was missing up a lot with his fastball, but it was also a really effective swing and miss pitch for him. So he's awesome. He's a really good pitcher.
these pitchers are not quite studs, but they were very encouraging on opening day. I know Logan Webb gave up 4 runs, 2 of those being home runs, career high 12.
Yeah, he pitched really well
in that game. His slider velocity was up 1.7 miles per hour. Marcus Stroman had 8 strikeouts over 6 shutout against the Brewers. He had 15 swinging strikes, and 4 of which came on a slurve pitch. And he threw that slurve 26% of the time. They didn't have anything like that in his, baseball savant pitching from last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the spin rate on that pitch was better than anything he threw last season, even better than his slider. It was up like 150 RPM. So
and
I thought
he's a constant tinkerer. He's one of those guys who is big into like the pitch shape and pitch. I don't know what the term would be, but just building your pitches from the pitch details up. And so, he's one of those guys who could unlock something with that tinkering, but I think the track record's long enough to suggest that he is what he is, but it's worth monitoring. I thought Logan Webb pitched outstanding today. Yeah. The results didn't really show it. They did the dumb thing where I think he was at like 78 pitches to start the 6th inning. So they brought him out. He gave up a walk, I think, to start the 6th, and then they pulled him. And I always hate that, like letting a pitcher start an inning and then just like there is no margin for error. You're going to pull them immediately if anything goes wrong. It's like, have some faith in him. So that was kind of frustrating. That inherited runner scored. The Yankees kind of opened it up in that inning. But I thought he pitched really, really well.
A few duds that we already mentioned, Aaron Nola and Jacob deGrom, they both stunk in that same game. Zach Gallen in one of the night games, he gave up 5 runs over 4 2/3 against the Dodgers. Sandy Alcantara, uncharacteristically bad control, at least compared to last year. He had 4 walks in his start against the Mets. Scott, anything worrisome with those names? Nola, deGrom, Gallen, Sandy.
So it was a 54-degree day in Los Angeles where Gallen was pitching. So a little on the cold side for baseball standards. The reason I bring it up is his fastball velocity was down 1 mile per hour on average. 13 whiffs on 89 pitches. That's a pretty good number, especially for Gallen. I don't think there's a lot to make of it yet. And the others, I don't have any concerns at all.
Okay. Do we care about these pitchers at all? Zach Greinke against the Minnesota Twins, he allowed 2 runs over 5 1/3. His sinker was up 1.3 miles per hour. His curve nearly 2 miles per hour. Kyle Muller was solid against the Angels. 5 innings pitched, 1 run allowed, 3 strikeouts. And then German Marquez turned in a quality start at the Padres. 6 innings, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, 0 walks. Any interest there? Greinke, Muller, German Marquez.
Not right now.
I would say Marquez was interesting because like he was better in the second half than the first half last season. He kind of turned his season around. He wasn't great. It was like a 4-ish ERA in the second half. And it was a lot with his sinker and his curveball being his primary pitches, and that was not the case today. Now that could just be a course field, he throws the sinker and curveball more kind of situation, but something to keep an eye on. He pitched well, and he's never going to be a great fantasy option because of course field, but he could get himself back into the, hey, he's away from course field, let's stream him discussion, which he was kind of out of last year. So that's one to keep an eye on. And then I don't know, it would be awesome if Zach Greinke had a little bit of a bounce back. His velocity was up. Gosh, I don't know the last time, at least for a season, his velocity hasn't been as high as it was today since 2017. He averaged 90.7 miles per hour with the fastball. I'm not sure. He may have had a start or 2 since then. But it would certainly be fun if this was the start of a little Greinke-sance, I guess we'd call it.
Scott, why don't you give us a few week 2 sleepers? I know that you'll have articles out on the site by Friday. Let's start off with a few pitchers here that you like for next week.
All right. It's always awkward turning around and writing the week 2 sleeper hitters and pitchers when week 1 has just started and you have no new information. But Hunter Brown is in line to make 2 starts, 1 against Detroit. So he's my favorite sleeper pitcher to the extent he's available. Hayden Wesneski, who is one of the big risers of spring training. He's at Cincinnati. Tough place to pitch, but good opponent, bad lineup he's facing. Kyle Bradish is in line for 2 starts, another big spring riser. Matchups are tougher at Rangers versus Yankees, but if you're looking on the waiver wire for pitchers to stream right now, you're a beggar, and beggars can't be choosers. Yusei Kikuchi, I mentioned him earlier for the extra long 11-day scoring period. Well, both of the starts he's making are during the final 7 days of those 11 days. At Kansas City, that's the good one. At the Angels, that could be tougher. He had a lot of strikeouts this spring. Martin Perez gets the Cubs in his season debut. It's just a 1-start situation for him. But, not a bad way to try and prove his to start his campaign to prove that last year's 2.89 ERA was legitimate. It only gets worse from there. It was hard filling out a list of 10 for this week, considering, the highest quality pitchers are generally going in this first weekend and not likely to make multiple starts next week. Matthew Boyd's a 2-star pitcher. One of them's against the Astros, so that feels pretty dangerous. Oof. But the other's against Boston. Zach Eflin goes against the A's, if you don't mind a 1-star guy. Ross Stripling against the Royals. I mean, Ross Stripling got pummeled this spring, so I don't even know that I want to risk that. But he is going against the Royals, and he was pretty good last year. So those are some pitchers. Let me pivot to hitters now. So the Rockies at the end of next week will be at home for the first time, and they'll be facing the Nationals pitching staff for 4 games. So that sounds like a pretty sweet deal. Ezekiel Tovar is somebody to start. Elahiris Montero, who of course homered opening day, somebody you could start. The Reds matchups aren't so great, but they're not so bad either. And I just feel like Jake Fraley, who I've been talking up a lot lately, of course, and Spencer Steer, who had that long home run on opening day. I just think they're 2 of the more under-rostered hitters right now. And so just from that perspective, I'd call them sleepers for next week. The Rangers are facing the Orioles and Cubs. Not a lot of good pitchers between those rotations. And so Josh Young is somebody you could consider starting coming off a good spring. We'll see how his weekend goes if the strikeouts get too high. But as of now, I think he could be a good play. And I'll mention just 2 more here. Adam Duvall, Pirates and Tigers are the pitching staffs the Red Sox are facing. 3 games at Fenway Park where Duvall's swing is perfectly suited. And Elvis Andrus is the other one. 3 lefties on the schedule for the White Sox. He hit .283 with an .827 OPS against lefties last year versus .236 with a .662 against righties. So a bunch of lefties on the schedule. It's usually going to be a good time to use Elvis Andrus.
All right. Well, we're going to go a little bit longer today. Opening day, lots to talk about. I want to get to a few bullpen updates here for the Nationals. Kyle Finnegan pitched in the 9th inning down 4-2. He gave up 3 runs, 2 of those earned. So not a great start there for Kyle Finnegan. For the Baltimore Orioles, Felix Bautista entered with a 3-run lead. He gave up 2 runs. 1 of those was earned. He struck out 2, but did pick up the save. His fastball was down 1.8 miles per hour compared to last year. Let's watch that with Felix Bautista. For the Cubs, they had a 4-run lead. Brad Boxberger was used in the 8th, and Michael Fulmer pitched in the 9th. For the Pirates, David Bednar struck out 2 for his first save. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley entered with a 1-run lead. He gave up 2 runs on 2 hits and a walk. He wound up taking the blown save and a loss. On the other side, Jordan Romano pitched a clean 9th inning with 2 strikeouts, picked up the save. And a cool note that I received from a listener on Twitter. The Blue Jays are the first team to allow a go-ahead run in the 6th, 7th, and 8th innings on the road and yet still win the game since the Red Sox did it back in 1938.
Wow.
I thought that was a pretty cool note.
Love that about baseball.
So many.
That there are so many games, and yet there can still be things that haven't happened in nearly 100 years. I love that.
It's crazy. For the Twins, Jorge Lopez pitched in the 7th inning with a 2-run lead. Griffin Jacks was used in the 8th. Yohan Duran walked 1, but picked up the save there. For the Mets, 2-run lead. Drew Smith in the 7th. Brooks Raley in the 8th. David Robertson struck out 2 in the 9th for the save. No Adam Ottavino, 7th or 8th. That was kind of interesting there. For
I have I have one league where I drafted Paul Sewald, Kendall Graveman, and Adam Ottavino. Just, hoping maybe two of them would be the primary save source for their respective teams. Not looking good after game one here.
I will just plant a flag and say that, like, I do not have any faith that Reynaldo Lopez can hold down a closer job. That might be unfair, but that is my position.
And also worth noting, like, if these teams are sincere in saying it's a committee, and certainly in the Mariners case, we have reason to believe they would prefer a committee, then there's no reason to assume that the guy who gets the first save is going to get.
Someone's got to get the first one.
Saves. Right. But a lot of times committees become not committees. And
someone's got to get the first one. You would rather that someone be the guy you were taking a flyer on.
Exactly.
For the White Sox, speaking of which, Kendall Graveman pitched in the 8th inning with the game tied at the time. The White Sox took the lead. Reynaldo Lopez pitched in the 9th, gave up a home run, a very long home run to Yordan Alvarez, but did pick up the save. Chris, I don't disagree with you. Your skepticism on Lopez. I just don't think Kendall Graveman's very good either. So I don't know what the answer will wind up being there.
He has been good in the past. He wasn't so good last year.
Yeah, Lopez was good as a reliever last year. I just don't have much faith in him.
That's
and for what it's worth, like, pitching the 8th in a tie game, that's not necessarily like he's not our closer situation,
Yeah. It would not surprise me one bit if Graveman is out there in the next save opportunity. What about the Astros? Ryan Pressly entered with the game tied in the 9th inning. He gave up 2 runs. The ESPN broadcast kept pointing out that Pressly was shaking his arm, kind of like he might be dealing with some kind of muscle or some kind of related. Roger Clemens was on the broadcast, obviously knows a lot about what a pitcher might be feeling when he's doing that. So I thought that was really interesting, just, speculating there with Ryan Pressly. And
velocity was fine for what it's worth.
He didn't look very good, but alas. For the Angels, Jimmy Herget was used in the 7th inning in a 1-run lead, and then I believe it was Ryan Tepera who came in the 8th, and he blew the game. He gave up 2 runs. On the other side, for Oakland, Trevor May pitched in the 8th inning, down 1 run at the time. His fastball and slider down nearly 2 miles per hour each. And then Danny Jimenez came in for the save once they took the lead. His velocity was way down. Fastball down 2.9 miles per hour. The slider was down 1.3 miles per hour. And last year he dealt with a shoulder injury. So I don't know. I don't really feel great about that for Danny Jimenez.
Yeah, I agree. But he is somebody who was basically not drafted anywhere. So if he goes and gets another save next time the A's have a chance, regardless of whatever concerns we have about him, he'll probably get a lot of attention on the off the waiver wire.
Danny Jimenez only 19% rostered on CBS right now. And then for the Mariners, Paul Sewald pitched in the 8th inning with the game tied. Then they took the lead, and Andres Munoz pitched in the 9th. He got the save. He did give up 2 hits, no strikeouts, but again, using the 9th inning there. Let's wrap up with to stream or not to stream for the weekend. How else would we wrap up Scott White's birthday, right? On Friday, David Peterson at the Marlins.
You could do worse.
It's fine, yeah.
It's a pretty good one.
Nick Martinez against the Rockies.
I like that one.
Yesterday we said, Scott, do not take the Hunter Gaddis. If you find it on the ground anywhere at a music festival, don't do it. At the Mariners. On Saturday, Clark Schmidt versus the Giants.
I'm interested. I'm not going to say that I would stream him for sure, but he's definitely someone I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. So, yeah.
Josiah Gray versus the Braves.
Don't love it versus the Braves.
Trend, but not against the Braves, yeah.
Shintaro Fujinami Saturdays against the Angels.
Preferably not against the Angels.
Dean Kramer at the Red Sox.
No.
Nah.
Spencer Turnbull at the Rays.
Nah.
Zach Eflin versus the Tigers.
I could do that one. I wish he showed us a little more in spring training, but
yeah,
it's a good matchup.
I'm not a believer, but it's fine.
Tyler McGill at the Marlins.
I think it's fine.
Michael
I
Walker.
prefer David Peterson against the Marlins. I don't know why, but I do. I might shy away from McGill.
Michael Wacha versus the Rockies.
I don't have a lot of faith in Waka. It's a pretty good matchup, but I'd rather not.
And then on Sunday, we've got Johnny Brito, not to be confused with Johnny Bravo, versus the Giants.
Nah, too risky.
Cole Irvin at the Red Sox.
No, that's a bad combination in that stadium.
Yeah.
Tanner Houck versus the Orioles.
I wouldn't.
Jared Schuster at the Nationals.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. Major League debut, which is risky, but really good match.
Scott, you're kind of going robot on us here. I would say, hey, jump out and jump back in, but we have like 30 seconds left. So
I know what my answer is for this next one.
Yeah, Graham Ashcraft, do it versus the Pirates. You know Scott is in there. Chris, these last two, Seth Lugo versus the Rockies, Bailey Falter at the Rangers.
I would pass. Lugo if you need one of those two, but I would pass.
All right, we're going to wrap there. Opening day in the books. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again on Monday. Bye-bye.